Okay, so yeah, we're doing page speed analysis for this website,
Yes. Yeah.
AmericarePT.com. So
By the way,
the
they're right
first,
next to Dr. Perna.
oh, okay, okay.
Isn't
So
that funny? We all work together. It's a giant family.
yeah,
I feel like we're the
so
local mechanic of New Jersey
mm,
for websites.
yeah,
Anyways, go ahead.
okay. So I'm using Google Page Speed Insights. So this is the
Yeah.
first tool that I always use when
Right.
analyzing performance, and it's worth mentioning that starting from I think May 2021, Google is actually gonna start taking into consideration these three things. The first, contentful paint, and we're gonna explain what they are. The largest, contentful paint, and cumulative layout shift. So they will start using these three things as a part of their algorithm, uh, probably in 5 to 6 months, and it's gonna be huge. So
So before we get started, so what that really means is that before anybody even gets to your website, before they see anything, before even Google makes a decision
yeah,
of what content and keywords and all this stuff, there's an impact being happening dramatically in a couple of months. And that's incredibly important for most people to understand.
yes, and we have to like explain it to people, especially the clients when they sometimes they really want to have like these sliders up, even though they're not even that good for conversions because people don't usually click on sliders. But the other thing is they're very resource intensive. You wouldn't believe that, especially when they are above the fold. So let me explain what above the fold means first. So that's whenever you reload the page, that's everything you see before you start scrolling down, right? So this here, it's sometimes called the viewport, and sometimes most of the times it's called above the fold area, right? So this is very important for performance, and I'm going to
Right.
explain
And
why.
this is also where we find a lot of mobile issues, right? Because at the end of the
Yeah,
day, um, as people have started to transition almost all of their behavior to mobile. And it's,
mhm,
I mean, how can you not think about mobile first at this junction? It's got to
yes,
be your focus. So if your
yeah,
mobile scores are low, fix, right?
yeah. I mean, like honestly, if the score is red, that's bad, right? But if it's yellow or green, it's still okay so far, But starting May 2021, it's not gonna be okay. So right now, the website performance is not that big of a factor for search engines as people think it is, right? But coming like 6 months from now, it's gonna be a big factor. So that's something to think about. And one other
Yeah,
thing is,
those that do this, yeah, those
yeah,
that do this now, right, can adjust and tweak and review. And then by the time that we run around spring, they're ready to
yes,
go. They get ranked, and everybody will
yes,
pop who has, already has this stuff fixed. So it's cool.
yes, ranking factor. Let me just prove it. So I'm not talking from my head. Can you see this? They
Yeah.
said this. They said this in May 2020. Core Web Vitals, which is these three things: the first, contentful paint; the largest, contentful paint; and cumulative layout shift. These are called Core Web Vitals altogether.
Well, it
The
would make
common.
sense if Google is telling you this, meaning that if you're on a dev tool from Google and they're saying, here's red, fix, like fix it.
Yeah,
To
yeah,
me, it's not that difficult. It's like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. If Google is telling you with big red marks to say, hey, it takes 5.8 seconds for you to load, that's a problem.
yeah. It's a huge problem, and it's not right now. It's not that big of a problem for Google, but it's a problem for users, right? Because people are becoming more and more impatient, and the first impression that you create on the user is very important. You know how when you click on a website that's fast and snappy, somehow you start trusting it right away. Even your subconscious brain starts thinking about it without even you knowing. Okay, so these guys, it's very smooth. The transitions from one page to the other. It doesn't take me time to load these pages and so on and so on. So it's got a lot of psychological influence that people can't even
Right.
explain
And
them.
especially if a network, so you're on a phone network, you
Yeah,
may be on 4G, you may be on a version of 4G, maybe on 3G, who knows?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
the better chance of of mobile having a better
yeah,
experience are all related to also network congestion.
yeah,
Because I can
yeah,
tell you, there are days, especially here in New Jersey, when it, it's tough. I mean, there are a lot of people
yeah,
using their phones, and it just makes a lot of sense to just fix this stuff. So what do we? Let's
yeah.
go through some other diagnostics here. So we've got the
Okay.
basic pain and stuff like that. What's next?
So let's start with this, right? This thing is called first contentful paint, right? And this is one of the top three factors that Google is going to count in the future. And what this basically means is how much time does it take for any like any graphical element on the interface to start painting from the time you request the URL, right? So when I type in americarept.com, when I press enter, how much time does it take for the first byte of data to start appearing on the screen, right? And that's one of the things that, look at this here. Like this is Google taking snapshots. Can you see this? So
Yeah,
taking
blank, blank,
snapshots
blank. Yeah,
point by blank,
huge
and
issue.
it doesn't like that. Ideally, you should start seeing something here, right? Something should start painting here, and then it should gradually go down, right? So if it starts painting here, that's not a good thing, right? And there are a couple of reasons why why this happens, and one of the things, one of the explanations is right here, right? Eliminate render blocking resources. And what this means is that, how do I explain it? And I don't want to sound too technical. Okay, basically, so when you request a web page, and it comes into your browser, the browser starts reading the page from top to bottom, right? And if you have some other scripts inside of your header, which is this in the code, right? You have the head tag, and you can put all the metadata about the page here, which is basically the title tag, the description of the website, how the website should look like when somebody shares it on Facebook or Twitter, and so on and so on. But one of the things is that you also put other different scripts that make the page interactive inside of this area, right? So for example, this here, when somebody hovers over the navigation, all of these things are controlled by a programming language, which is called JavaScript, right?
Sure.
And this,
No, and I
and
think
this,
we all. So
yeah.
let me just. I understand where you're going with this,
Mhm.
and I
Mhm.
think we all understand that there's a lot of weight. Maybe is the best way to put that into the head.
Yes, so the problem is, the problem why this is happening, why nothing starts painting, is that Google or Chrome starts reading the code from top to bottom, right? And when it stumbles on a script, it goes into that script and starts reading that script, and then it pauses everything, So instead of going down right away like this, it stops and it goes into the file, into, like, for example, this one. Can you see this? This is a CSS
Yeah,
style
yeah,
sheet. So it reads this, and then it goes here, and then boom, it goes here, and then starts reading this. And while it's reading this piece
yeah,
of
yeah.
code, everything below stops, right? Which is, of
Sure.
course,
No,
it's a
that's what I'm
matter of
saying.
yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
What just what I was saying. There's so much weight in the front end of the site. It's like having a boat anchor on your
Yeah.
site, just
Yeah.
dragging along the ground because you're just making it do more and more calculations just to explain how to set the page up when that stuff can be not necessarily. I think when it eliminates maybe not the best way to put it, but
Yeah.
to reposition it. Maybe is a better way to do it,
Yes,
right?
yes. So the idea is but you have to reposition it while still, there are other elements on the page that are dependent on that code, right? So you have to be smart. You
Of
have to
course. Of course.
split the code, right? So whatever is not necessary right away for the first screen, for this screen to paint, you always put it at the bottom, right? So then the user gets like the perceived performance is okay, this loaded instantly, while in fact none of these here have loaded right away, but for the user, what's
Right.
important is that this screen paints right away before they start
Correct.
scrolling. So this is and
Okay.
this yeah, and by do how can you improve the how can you do that, right? You can split the code. You keep the code that's necessary to paint this part, and you put the other code at the bottom. right? So
Sure.
that's one of the things that can increase this thing here, right? And right away, right immediately after that, you have the largest contentful paint, which is basically like a sibling to this. But what this means is how much time does it take for the biggest element inside of this screen, the visible screen, to paint, right? And the biggest element is this background image, which there are multiple images, right? So
Yeah.
this is like how much time does it take for the biggest elements to load and for the user to see right away. So this is the second thing you can work on. And the way to fix it, I see that the photos are already optimized because they're kind of blurry, which is okay for the web, right? You can use you can use more modern image formats like WebP, for example, which basically cuts the image size by 70%, right? So that's one of the things you can do to improve this, right? And the next thing, right, time to interactive. This is how much time. 8.8 seconds is really a lot, right? So how much time does it take before the user can start interacting with elements? For example,
Right.
how much time does it take before you can hover over this and this thing appears, right? So it's a lot of time. You can fix. There are a lot of fixes to do that. And then this one is very important, which is orange, which is not good, is cumulative layout shifts. So basically, I don't know, you probably experienced this when you scroll the website. Let's say you have this heading here, and then you have let's say a one paragraph of text, and then you have the other paragraph. And when you come to this, when you start reading the second paragraph, suddenly they break up, and then you see the image show up, in the middle between two paragraphs.
Yep.
This is because you didn't assign the appropriate space for that image to appear, right? So it splits up the
Yep.
first paragraph and the second. And this is what Google hates, because it's not good for the user. There are so many problems. For example, if you want to order something, let's say you wanted to request an appointment, you are about to click this, and then the image appears above that, right? And then pushes
Right.
the appointment button down. Or you accidentally want to cancel an order, but you by accident you actually click on buy because the buttons have moved because of the image above, right? So this is the layout shifting that's happening, right? So this is something that all of these things are easily fixable, but you have to know what you're doing. Uh, like if you want to go down, like for example, we're not gonna go through everything, but for example, render blocking resources. This is what I said before, right? Render blocking, which means you have a script and it's blocking the rendering of the entire page,
Right.
so you have to split it up into two. Initial server response time. This is probably a web hosting problem. So let me see where this website is hosted. Who's hosting this.com? Let me check if it can detect the web host. Mm, oh, its servers are Yahoo. Um, Let me see who is hosting this website. Hosting checker. Let's see if this one can find out.
Like who's
Uh,
the root host of Yahoo?
yeah. So who is hosting this website? Let me see if we can find out. Oops. Have you seen that? So that was a cumulative layout shift. Can you see this?
Yeah,
How
I saw it.
everything
It's
is.
shift.
So it's
Yep.
it's it's crazy, right? So this is what Google wants to stop. Who is hosting this website? See, this is a bad user experience. Everything is moving around. That's why I'm gonna click back. Um, okay, so we. I don't think we're able to find it, but it's basically it's a web hosting issue. This here, you can improve it by hosting it on a CDN, using the cloud hosting and so on and so on, like a lot of options.
Yeah,
On
there's a
you,
lot of when you start to look at real hosting
yeah,
strategies and you use content delivery networks
yeah,
like a
yeah,
CDN,
yeah,
now you're actually resourcing a lot of the allocation on in the cloud as opposed to trying to put it onto the
yeah,
server where there's just a waste of complete bandwidth being
yeah,
used where there's such faster servers that could be
yeah.
utilized. But anyways,
And it's not even expensive anymore.
no,
It's not like it was what it was like 5 to 10 years ago. Now it's it's much more. It's pretty much a standard. If you want a fast website, you need to get yourself a fast CDN and a cloud hosting provider. So yeah.
Okay.
Remove unused CSS. So that let's just finish with this. CSS is basically the styling language of the web, and most of the time you have a lot of elements, a lot of CSS code gets pulled even though it doesn't do anything for the specific page. So for example, I don't know what it is like specifically for this web page. It would take me more time to find out. But for example, you can have different classes that have to do something with something that's on another page, but you're still calling it here. So you have to clean up the code. So the browser only calls the code that's actually relevant for this particular page, right? So yeah, so all of these
Let's
small
take a
things.
look at GT metrics for a second, since
Okay.
we've done this page, and since I think this
Yeah.
gives us even a better print, because what I see is when I see a GT metric score of an
Hmm.
E,
Hmm.
it tells me that we know that the big issues are the paint in this particular case. So if we went to the waterfall and we looked at the performance, we know like a lot of it has to do with there's something hanging this thing up. Like there's probably one or two main things that are hanging this up, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the for example, look at this. Like there are a couple of scripts that are not even loading. Let me check the console to see. Yeah, like look at this. Like if you click on console, there are more than 40 errors, right? So
Right.
this is something that needs to be fixed. For example, this one here, 27 error calls, which is huge. So but the thing with GT metrics is that it's basically starting to pull the same thing that Google is pulling, because they
Sure.
figured out what the best metrics are to actually measure the real perceived performance, not the real performance, but the perceived performance that the user experiences, right? So it's the same thing. Like look at this, everything reappears. So the first contentful paint, largest contentful paint, blocking time, much longer than recommended. So you lose 1 second just by looking at the scripts that shouldn't even be there in the first place.
Right.
So a lot of the things are the same here, right? So if you look at the waterfall, you can't see anything specific, right? Because DNS lookup, it's fine, 63 milliseconds, which is
Sure.
really
What
good.
I look at is all the zeros, though. What I try and find is a zero where I know there's a problem, right? So if you go
Yeah,
down there, like you just right there, like I see that's a problem. It's getting hung up. That's a problem. It's getting hung up.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's for example, this one here doesn't even exist. It's a 404.
right.
So this here, the add this element, which is a very unpopular widget, just fixing a couple of these things can help you out. But eventually you have to look at it from a holistic level, right? So you have to optimize images, you have to optimize the code, and you have to do a couple of tweaks in order to get these things down, and you should be fine, right? So
Yeah. So
yeah.
another question I have, and then we'll wrap it. But
Mhm.
um, there's 69 requests in this load for this page, right? So
Yes.
it's so obviously I think we'd want maybe potentially less requests if we didn't have to, if they're just sort of like a bunch of little nothing um, images, like to maybe have instead of 10 different images broken out, maybe have a one image that's clickable for multiple things. Like, I
uh,
don't know. I mean, these things
yeah,
like
yeah.
seems like there's so much repetitiveness on here that doesn't need to be here.
um yeah, I mean, you can definitely combine scripts. For example, JavaScript scripts, you can combine them into
Okay.
one. uh, the thing is, with HTTPS, you don't have to do that. So sometimes it's even better to have multiple smaller scripts than one bigger script, right? Because
Okay.
HTTPS allows you to download the resources in parallel. For example, 7 to 8 at the same time.
Sure.
But
Sure.
yeah, but I mean, there are a lot of things like you can. For example, you're right. You can use less if these images are not absolutely necessary. For example, these icons here, they're fine. Let me check. Yeah, look at this. Like for example, this is one of the typical examples. So this is an SVG file, which is perfect. It should be an SVG. But why not? Why do we need a second call? Why do we need a call for that resource when you can actually embed the SVG image right into the web page. So
Well,
instead
that's
of
what I was
calling it,
saying. Just you
yeah,
combine a lot of resource allocation so that you're not
yeah,
doing a bunch of polls for no reasons. Just it's
yeah,
allocated
yeah,
in tandem, like you were
yeah,
saying.
yeah.
Like these can all be pulled up in tandem, but you got to make them so they don't have multiple threads underneath it.
Yes, yes, yes. That's correct. This is a typical example of SVG images, because I see a lot of people calling them externally, like as if it were a JPEG or a PNG file, when it's not necessary. You can embed the entire icon into the page, and it will load right away, and you will not have additional calls. Like if you can eliminate just that, you save yourself from 8 calls here, right? You have
Right.
8 images, and you can save yourself, yeah, basically 8 calls right away in a second.
Cool.
So yeah, a lot of
Well,
smaller tweaks. Yeah,
yeah, and this is, by the way, this is like a typical website. We don't. I mean, 95% of the websites that we see are great. I mean, are just not even close like this. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
everybody needs a tweak, and by June or May of next year,
yeah,
it's going
yeah,
to have a massive impact. So good. Thank you, Ivan. I appreciate your help. This has been a wonderful way to look through this stuff. And although somewhat detailed, I think people get the fact that, don't have a boat anchor dragging your website along the ground.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
no reason to do it, and your customers don't like it either. And especially as we noticed, if things are flipping around on your website as someone's trying to scroll, it's a real annoyance.
yeah, yeah.